You mentioned one shot in life, and it makes me think of the different codes that sort of write our culture and our lives. Like, in other podcasts, you talked about, like, growing up in a very religious family, and then moving beyond that and having to find other scripts that inform the way in which you live your life. Have you come to any others that you found to be just incredibly helpful guides for you that doesn't have the dogma attached to it?
I mean, I think that's all already in here. It's all, yeah, I think morality is something that's innate. It's in us. Maybe not like completely instinctual, but to function in a society, you have to have some form of morality, right? But at the same time, I think, like, I have what's the word I'm looking for? I seriously dislike and turn away from anything traditional. If we're only doing something because of tradition, I have to see how my life functions without that in it. And if it makes my life worse, I bring it back in.
Yeah, tradition is not a great argument.
No.
But that's a very cool point, though, because it's so powerful, and if you don't recognize what's tradition versus what actually has utility beyond just the fact that everyone does it, it's very hard to differentiate what is a smart way to live your life.
Yeah. And, I think things like religion have tried to capitalize or, what's the word I'm looking for? To own morality, but that stuff's already there. You can go look at a pack of dogs and see all of human morality boiled down to its most basic instincts. If you're an asshole, somebody else is going to finally be fed up with you, and they're going to bite you, and, if you are constantly taking from others, they're eventually going to be over it, and they're going to take back from you. And whether that's a pound of flesh or food, it's going to happen. There's no wrong way to learn morality, I think. I mean, I can probably come up with a few. But I think it's better just to learn that it's not because of a consequence at the end. It's because of the happiness and enjoyment and functioning well in the life that you have.
I think that it sort of goes in two directions, where some people will live within tradition and the comfort of that, and they will tend to gravitate towards what other people are doing just because they've found safety and comfort within that. And then there are people who have a combative relationship to it. I very rarely meet, and I think you're in the latter group, but I very rarely meet people who are ambivalent to it. It's like you either go left or right, up or down. There's a force and a tension that you need to respond to in one way or another.
I think just the way that I was raised led to me just really having a distaste for somebody coming in and saying, these are the rules. And when you say why, it's because I said so.
Yeah. For most people haven't listened to the last podcast, so you did. Can you give just a little bit of background on it? Because I think it informs a lot of the decisions that you've made in your life.
Yeah, I'll give the super short version, which is I was raised Jehovah's Witness. I was an ordained minister. My dad was a scholar for the organization. And then around 18 years old, I started translating the books myself from Greek using something called the Diaglot, which, I didn't necessarily learn Greek, but I learned how to translate it. And I would read those passages in the Bible that doctrine is based on and figure out that it's not saying what I'm being taught it's saying, that words have been changed. There's something called Strong's Exhaustive Concordance of the Bible, and they have removed things and put things in for thousands of years. So once I started realizing that the way I was raised wasn't something that I believed anymore, I was like, well, I've always been taught about this science stuff being kind of, made up and just a way to control people. So I started looking into it and realizing, wow, they've actually done research. They've tested this stuff. Like, it's not the science that I was taught. The science I was taught was a whole different thing. And that just put me on this path to always assuming that my information was incomplete, and learning that I can believe something wholeheartedly and it can still be wrong. So I'm going to argue my points with you. It's going to be a discussion. I'm not going to just say, oh, that's how you see it. Okay, I'll see it that way too. But I'm willing to change my perspective on anything.
I think that the mindset that you're operating with incomplete information is such a wise approach. I just read a book called How to Be Perfect. Have you heard of this book?
No.
It's a very funny book. It's written by a guy named Mike Schur, who's a Saturday Night Live comedy writer, and it's a book about philosophy. So he dives into Aristotelian philosophy, Kant, the fat man in the trolley car problem, like all these very deep philosophical questions, and he does it in just really hilarious ways. But I believe it was Kant who was like, his whole thing was do more good than bad, and that you can look at every decision as good or bad. And what the author Mike Schur says is that we're operating with such incomplete information so often that often what we think is the right decision that's doing good is just being made with that incomplete info.
Yeah.
And I think that just walking around with that provides a lot of humility, and certainty is a very dangerous ideal to walk around with.
But also imagine if the whole world had my perspective. It wouldn't be a great place.
Right, everyone would just be like, well, I don't know, maybe it could be.
Because like I describe myself as a nihilist, but I also, even though I don't think it matters, I want to be a good person.
Right.
Right? And if everybody had that perspective, maybe things would be better.
You describe yourself as a nihilist.
Yeah, just like I really don't think anything matters. I think, look forward 100 billion years. Look even further forward than that. Think about the energy death of the universe. Like, at some point, either everything's going to collapse back in on itself, or it's going to expand out to the point where there's the energy death, and we're going to have a point where time ceases to exist. And when that happens, there's no past either. And now this is my thinking on it. Like, maybe there's an astrophysicist out there that's going like, yeah, that's totally bullshit. But
what about morality?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind
why be moral if it doesn't matter?
Because I think it matters for now. And I think you have to kind of separate those viewpoints. At least that's how I go by it, right? Like, if nothing mattered and I decided, like, I'm just going to serve myself in this life, and I'm just going to, take advantage of people, I'm going to be a con artist, whatever it is, right? Cheat on my girlfriend, I'm going to be a miserable person. My life's going to suck. So that's what I think morality is how to function in the here and now. It doesn't matter in 100 billion years if I run a red light or do something way more horrible than that. But, it will matter for my life now. It could shorten my life. It could make me hated. It could make me depressed and miserable. And I want to get the best experience that I can with my time here.
We can cut it out if you don't want to talk about it. But if you do, have you had any experiences on psychedelics?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you're open to talking about it?
I'm way open to talking about it. I don't,
Have your experiences on psychedelics changed your
100%.
philosophies at all?
Yeah. So I love mushrooms, and we can get into that a little bit more if you want. I have medical reasons for it, and also just like experiential reasons for it. But I've only done acid twice in my life, and the first time I did it, it was just like the most beautiful experience, and everything was perfect. It made everything around me perfect. So I went back out to recreate that. And this time it said to me, nope.
Yeah.
This time you're going to
So-
learn a lesson.
Roll the dice.
And I'm going to back up for 2 sentences here. When I was 21, I thought I had a kid. It turned out it wasn't my kid. I got a DNA test after a year, like heavy circumstance that I think led to me having a horrible mistrust of women and thinking, I don't trust them, so I don't need to be very trustworthy either, right? So then I went out a couple of years later on this acid trip in Joshua Tree, and it was just like, okay, we are now going to strip down everything about you and show you piece by piece everything you're doing wrong, how it's leading to you mistreating people, how it affects them, and why your life is the way it is. At the time I was super broke. I'd just broken up with somebody, and I just realized all these things about myself that I was holding myself back from having the life that actually would make me happy. And it changed who I am as a person, like 180 degrees. So I really view that as something that I learned from and that it was incredibly valuable for me, but I still haven't done acid again since.
Yeah. It's a doozy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually when people do acid, they're not like, I want to do that again. Usually they're like, whoa.
I mean, I meet people who are like, oh yeah, I do it like every week.
Yeah.
Like, that's too much, man.
You know,
mushrooms, I can control. You can give me a bad trip on mushrooms, and I'm like, oh wow, the mushrooms are giving me a bad trip.
Well, the dose on LSD is just so hard to control. You know that LSD gave way to a revolution in neuroscience because it's measured in micrograms. So the idea that something so small could have such a big impact on the mind led scientists to believe to basically study serotonin. And study neuroscience with more accuracy and curiosity.
Yeah, and this brings up something that maybe there's information out there on, but I haven't found it. But like these molecules that are in DMT, mushrooms, acid, like they're all really, really close to serotonin.
Serotonin, yeah. The LSD is how we found serotonin.
Right. So like, how is it that replacing the molecules changes our perception of reality, right? So in a sense, serotonin is giving us a perception of reality. Like we're tripping the real world right now.
Yeah,
you know?
and
like,
LSD is just attaching to the serotonin receptor.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's giving it to you because you're experiencing reality in a totally different way. But in another sense, you have all that inside you, which is why something like breath work can be so profound, right?
Yeah.
You can induce these altered states without the chemicals. To your point, though, about some people who are just like, I'm going to trip on acid all the time. One of my favorite quotes about psychedelics is from Alan Watts. You know who Alan Watts is?
Oh, yeah.
So he was not a huge psychonaut, and someone once asked him, well, you are speaking about a lot of what these other psychedelic luminaries are speaking about, but you're not often talking about psychedelics. And he said, psychedelics, I believe, are a microscope, and you don't want to live your whole life under a microscope.
Now, my friend Cale was no Alan Watts, but he said something to me right at the beginning of my journey into psychedelics. He's like, you just have to understand, they're a window, they're not a door, right? You get to look in on that other side, but you're not walking through.
That's profound.
And I think that I learned a lot. I keep what he said in mind a lot of the time when I'm having these experiences. I'm looking at that other side. And we had a conversation earlier. I've gotten to the point where I really believe that one of the things that psychedelics is doing is they're taking down a barrier between you and your subconscious. And I'm starting to view my subconscious as almost like a separate entity inside of me. It knows a lot about me. It knows a lot, like it gets to watch me from behind the doors, you know? But to function in the conscious world, I don't think that you can be constantly communicating with your subconscious. So when people do DMT and they say, I met an entity and it was angry at me, or it was very inviting, it's odd how often that kind of relates to that person's own, like, inner demons, you might say. So I think that's where we have a lot of the progression, in internal progression, is by breaking that barrier down a little bit and seeing ourselves from the viewpoint of a different person that's living inside of us.